1. So 3 weeks ago, I left my corporate small fry job making $12 an hour, with tips, for a cushy salaried $60K a year head chef position. The new job seemed to be going really well. I was enjoying it. The owner got some much-needed time off, and time to work on his reservations to the place. I knew I wasn't walking into the most well-maintained and clean environment, and planned to really spruce up the kitchen. Keep in mind, I was the only kitchen staff they had. The owner seemed really nice. He only had to pop in for about 30 minutes a day to see if I needed anything from the store. My coworkers were all really nice, and all the regulars gave me high praise for my food. It was honestly a dream job for me. When I was going through the interview process, I had informed my potential new employer that I had some pre-approved time off at my old job, 3 days to celebrate my 25th birthday with my husband and mother-in-law. 3 days because my mother and her boyfriend were coming from another state for their normal visit, and 2 days to celebrate my husband's birthday. All of which were spread out throughout the month of June. First round of 3 days went by with no issue. I returned to work and had a good time. Next 3 days went by spending time with my mom. When I returned to work this last Tuesday, everything seemed fine. Yesterday I went into work, not really having any prep to do, and being a thunderstorm day, it was slow. I did maybe $150 in food sales in a full 8-hour shift. I sent a text to the owner asking if he wanted me to shut down early, as was the example he sent during my first week of training. We did $300 in food sales, and he shut us down an hour early for it being so slow. He responded and said no. Keep the kitchen open full hours no matter what. I understood, responded that I would without issue, and went about my night. That evening, about 10 minutes after I returned home, the owner asked me to call him. In the phone call, he informed me that our relationship was not working out, and we needed to part ways. I had no warnings, no talking tos, and he could give me no reasonings other than, "You just had 6 days off, and you wanted to close early. It seems you're just not the right fit." Now, my husband, mother-in-law, and myself were fuming, as it's kind of a shit thing to do to an employee. But due to us being an at-will state, there was nothing I could do to fight it. This morning, I'm on Indeed, putting out more applications, and I noticed my old job was posted, but with a minor change. The posting went from $60K a year down to $18 an hour, nearly half of what he agreed to pay me. This pissed me off. If he was just a decent human and told me that he couldn't uphold the original agreement for the salary, I would have agreed to a pay cut. I did really enjoy this job and the people I was with. Instead, he beat around the bush and refused to give me any reasonings, making me believe I had done something wrong. So now I have concocted the revenge. I only worked for him for 12 shifts total. In those 12 shifts, I did some cleaning, but couldn't accomplish it all as there was a lot. So this morning I went and grabbed the email from the FSA, Food Safety Administration, for those who may not know, for my county, and sent them a lengthy email about my concerns for this place. As a less detailed version, it included things like flooring being a safety hazard. There are literal chunks missing, allowing food to get stuck and people to get hurt. Refrigeration systems leaking and not being properly maintained. A large mold outbreak behind one of the food lines. Containers of veggies being used for pizzas that were dated as being opened mid-April. Suggested use time is 7 days fresh, 14 canned. Workers dropping food and picking it up off the floor before serving said dropped food to customers. My personal fave, a bartender coming back with shakers filled with grated Parm cheese that molded. The owner telling her to pick the mold out and refill the shakers with the unmolded cheese. Plus more things that I won't include on here, but the state of the place was atrocious. I will update y'all if anything ever comes of this. I'm not sure anything will. Either way, it's made me feel better knowing that there is a chance that there could be some backlash to an owner who has no common courtesy for their fellow workers. I was not okay with the conditions, in case you're wondering. Aside from the floor, it was just a lot of cleaning that I knew I would be able to get done with time. I only had 12 days to try and change everything, and that it was not enough time to deep clean a kitchen by yourself. that you can't shut down. As for the gross food violations, I threw out what foods I could, and when I noticed the bartenders doing violations, I pulled them aside and spoke to them privately after trying to replace the necessary items. One person cannot change a whole crew in a few days. 2. Back in late 2019, my neighbor Tim attended his best friend's wedding, the groomzilla of this story. From what Tim told me, him and groomzilla had been friends since middle school, somewhat relevant for later. Tim was one of the groomsmen for groomzilla's wedding because, they're friends. Fast forward to the wedding reception, and all is going well. Tim walks over to the bar to get a drink. For context, the bar was close to where the catering staff were serving food, when out of nowhere there was an argument where the catering staff were. Sure enough, groomzilla was being verbally abusive towards one of the caterers. The argument, from what Tim was able to understand, was over some food dish that the catering staff stopped serving because they ran out of a certain meat. This was 2 hours into the reception. The guy in charge of the catering stands between groomzilla and the person they were berating. The guy in charge tells groomzilla to stop berating his staff since they have other food they can serve as a plan B. But he didn't like that answer, to which he responds that it wasn't his fault and uttered a slur that Latino people would be familiar with. Turns out, the person groomzilla was berating was Latino. Fast forward about 20 minutes, and Tim witnesses the catering staff stop what they're doing and began putting the food into meal containers and began loading it onto one of the vans that belonged to the catering staff, and the propane grills that they were using being loaded onto a truck that one of the staff brought. Sure enough, word reaches groomzilla, and he makes another scene. Since it took place outside, almost everyone didn't notice except Tim and the security guard. Groomzilla threatened legal action for breach of contract, but the guy in charge of catering countered the threat by threatening to call the cops on groomzilla for racially abusing one of his staff members, and that he has witnesses including the catering staff who saw everything, and Tim, who just happened to be nearby. From what Tim told me, that got groomzilla to shut up and walk back into the venue. After the wedding, Tim told groomzilla that what he did was horrible, but he tried to convince Tim that he did nothing wrong. But before he could continue, Tim stopped him and told him that the friendship between the two of them was now over, since he still couldn't see the bigger picture of what he just did. So, moral of the story, don't be a racist, egocentric idiot. 3. Years ago, I was a low-level IT manager at a major media company. My team was understaffed. We had too many projects to care for, and no IT tester to test our apps. So me, the programmers, and the product owner, a business side, non-technical member, needed to test our apps ourselves. The IT director, my boss, never helped with the issues because of budget reasons. It was common knowledge that the company has major money problems for years. It sucked, but we managed to properly care for our apps. One primary project was redesigning our sport news app that produced the biggest revenue with mobile ads. The app was over 8 years old at this point, and it worked like a really old car. So obviously we were creating it from scratch. It was a slow process, because at the same time we needed to update and fix many other apps. We were basically a skeleton crew. The problem started when the product owner left and was replaced by someone that I can only describe as cartoonishly not fit for the job. It was a person that did not care for the product, users, or other people. The only important thing for her was to make her boss, a business director, happy. An ideal yes man. She was also lazy and had no true experience or knowledge about creating mobile apps. She never really did anything important that the former product owner did. What she was doing was organizing meetings, going to meetings, drinking coffee, and just slacking off on the web. It was not a big deal for me because I did my job well, and everything was going forward as planned. And she behaved okay-ish. Important part is that she did not test the app, and she really did not know or wanted to know the app. I have never seen her using any of our apps now that I think about it. One day she informed us that there was some internal deadline for finishing it, And it is February 1st, almost a full year later. This is just some budgeting date that, for any sane company, is not that important for in-house projects. We informed her that with all our responsibilities and lack of programmers, the chances of finishing every planned function are near zero. But we could release a basic version of the app without this and that function for a really small portion of the users, like 1%. Later, we could update with missing stuff, and then progressively go to 100%. She was happy with the solution, and the whole team was informed of our plan. So we proceeded as before, creating the new app and caring for other apps at the same time, and informed about our new app progress every week. Fast forward to November, and I have a short vacation period. When I return, I learn that the new PO is furious with our progress, even though everything is going according to plan. During my absence, she informed our bosses that we are in crisis mode, because the app will not be ready for February 1st, and we, mainly me, are to blame. Turns out her boss wanted the whole app to be ready and not some basic version of it. She never really informed him of our agreed plan, or he changed his mind, or whatever. So she tells everyone that the plan was always to fully release the whole app, and now we are the liars. No one took our side, and at this point, I was already looking for a new job because screw that noise. We needed to cut many functions after all, because it was just impossible at this point to finish them. Here's the malicious compliance. I stayed at the company until the deadline, and the last thing I did was releasing the new app to every single user. One of the most important parts of the app were the mobile ads that created the revenue. The app itself was free. I created the ads just as I was told to and tested them myself. The PO did not test the app, so nobody noticed that the new app had way less ads that are showing way less frequent. But what the app had more is bugs, of course, because we couldn't properly test everything with that amount of work in that short time with no tester. Month after release, the ad revenue plummeted and the users were not happy with the app, so many of them moved to other news apps. I was happily working somewhere else at this time, and I heard that it was total chaos with this new app. Because of the revenue issue, the PO and her boss even considered bringing the old app back, which is hilarious. Because that shit barely worked. Last time I checked, even the most die-hard programmer that worked there for more than a decade, which is a miracle in IT, said fuck it and left sometime later. Years later, and she still works there, the current team is still understaffed and overworked. The apps are buggy and poorly managed. Meanwhile, I have the best job of my life, and for many years, everyone is extra happy with my management. This takes place about 15 years ago. Worked in an open seating policy with no assigned seats, but some people had their spot, where they were always happy. Most people, out of respect, wouldn't sit there. All the workstations were dumb terminals where you logged in and worked off all the company applications, and all work was saved to servers. My group was a higher tier, so we all sat close to each other. After they did some upgrades to the HVAC system, heat was blowing directly on our section every day. It was getting so bad that I was feeling faint halfway into my shift, every day. I'm tall, so maybe the heat is hitting my head more. I easily get overheated, going home and getting sick. Told my boss in HR that I can't sit there and continue to work, as I'm calling out sick every other week. They acknowledged the issue and said they will get it fixed, as it is not happening in the other sections. A couple of months go by with nothing done. I'm almost out of sick time. Boss says any day now it will be fixed. I ask him if that's the case, can I sit in another section until it's fixed, as I'm almost out of sick time. He agrees, as I can do my work from anywhere. So I move a few rows up. This one coworker is pissed off and says I'm not a team player. One day we both work on the same ticket as he didn't assign it to himself. So, a small mistake was made, nothing big. Boss says we need to better communicate with each other. I said, well, he just needs to see who grabbed the ticket and this would not have happened. He takes this mistake very personally. He talks to the boss and HR to force me to sit in the group section. They say no. He was approved to sit in another section. He's not happy. Keeps making comments, but I ignore him. Then, during a team meeting, I ask my boss a question about an ongoing issue. He jumps in and goes off on me, saying, "If you stay with the rest of the team, you'd know the answer." Then for a few more minutes berates me about not being a team player and threatens me that I better move back. I'm shocked and speechless. I look at my boss and say this is acceptable behavior. He then tells them to calm down and take a walk to cool down, and I wasn't doing anything that he didn't approve. After the meeting, my boss asked me to walk back with him to his office. He asks me, is this the first time he blew up like this? At me, it was the first time, but he has at others. He says since he witnessed this, he has no choice but to write him up and send it to HR. Fine by me, I don't care. HR writes him up and tells him to leave me alone. A couple of months go by and he's continually saying nasty things about me to coworkers. They finally fix the heating. He then makes a comment. "It's all fixed now, you can wear your big boy pants and sit with us, you sissy." PettyRevenge time. Since there are no assigned seats and I personally don't care where I sit, unlike him, he must have a certain station no matter what. So one day I work an extra shift and sit in his spot, as it was open. He comes in for his shift and asks me if I'm planning on staying there. I respond yes. He makes a face and waits till the shift ends for another station to be free. I don't think much of this. Next day, coworkers were saying how he insulted me for sitting in his spot. I didn't do it on purpose, but now that I know it pisses him off, and since he's been talking trash about me for months, I got a bright idea. I started to come in early some days and wait for that seat if someone is sitting there, and take that seat as is first come, first served. I know the days off of the guy who sits there before my shift, and I sign up for OT on those days when available. This is really annoying him. He's telling everyone I'm doing it on purpose. He starts to come in 1 hour before his shift starts, non-paid, to get his seat. The days I'm not getting OT, when I know the seat is open prior to my shift, I come in 2 hours early to do paid mandatory training. He sees me sitting there as he came in 1 hour early, his head about to explode. I would take his seat 2 or 3 days per week. He's so upset he goes crying to the boss and HR to make me stop sitting there as it's his spot. They tell him again that there's no assigned seating, and they both tell him not to bother me. Boss tells me if he acts up towards me to let him know. After a couple of months of me not backing down, as I'm very petty, he wants to speak to me. Being super nice, asks me why I'm sitting there as that's his spot. Nope, department policy is no assigned seating. He says, I don't understand why you're doing this to me. Why are you being so mean as I never did anything to you? I burst out laughing. Sure, you didn't keep saying that to yourself? After a little more of him trying to convince me not to sit there anymore, I say, well, you should have thought of that before you yelled at me and continued to talk trash about me for the past few months. Now that you want something from me, you're being nice. Well, I'm sorry about that. I was an asshole. I agree you were, but don't expect something from someone that you bullied. Sorry, I'm going to stick to company policy. First person gets the seat of their choice. If you don't like it, go to the boss and HR and get it changed. Maybe we can go by seniority. Oh, wait, I have more than you. Seeing that he wasn't going to get his way, he left the room, and I can hear him blowing up in the hallway. Co-workers asking what's wrong with him. He's angry and he wants his seat. We all laughed. After a while, co-workers on my shift ask me not to sit there, as they are getting tired of him constantly complaining, and said I made my point not to annoy me. I say he hasn't learned his lesson yet, as he is still talking trash about me. This went on for another year till I left the company. I never came in early where I wasn't being paid for it, unlike him where he would sometimes come in up to 2 hours early, non-paid, to get his spot. 5. About last year, I moved out with my boyfriend of almost 4 years. We had discussed moving in together and my home life was a wreck, so moving out with him was a heavenly idea. At the time, I was unemployed, and even asked if that was okay with my boyfriend. He said it was fine, so in order to help, I found the apartment while my family furnished most of that apartment. They bought us furniture, food, stuff for the kitchen, and basically everything one would need when they first move out. Months go by, and everything seems good to me. But around Halloween, things tend to get a bit tense. He started getting agitated with me, and he would talk about a female coworker a lot, even texting her outside of work, out of concern. To me, it wasn't a red flag, because he's always been kind of like that. I told him I know that was inappropriate because he was her boss, and that it made me a little uncomfortable. Skip about 2 months and he comes home. He sits me down and says, "I want to break up." My jaw drops because I knew we had some issues, but I thought we were working on them. I asked him several times if there was any way for us to work it out. He stayed silent, so I told him that I guess it was over and that I'd been moving out because I couldn't afford to live there. And also because it was a one-bedroom and I didn't want to be near him. I told him I was going to tell our friends about what happened and that everything my family bought was coming with me. He agreed to both, and I called my mom, and she came to pick me up that night. My family all came over, and I cried a lot that night. One of my cousins was kind and got me a giant stuffed animal, and even ran to the store to get me some pain medicine for my stomach. The next day, I woke up and started planning for my move-out. I set up a moving truck for the end of the week. I informed my ex about everything and told him I'd be coming by throughout the week to pack. I first packed everything that I'd be upset about if he broke or stole. He wasn't the type to do that, however. I also thought we'd be together for the rest of my life, so I wasn't taking chances. After I got my main stuff, I started packing everything me and my family bought. This included dishware, cooking stuff, utensils, cups, cleaning supplies, and so on. I even took the Christmas decorations because I was the one who bought them. When I was done packing everything, my ex was shocked that my family bought that much. He thought for sure he bought some of it. I informed him he didn't, and he left it at that. As the move-out got closer, I informed him that the desk, washing machine, and dryer were also mine. My dad bought those for me, and even told me that if anything happened that they were mine. He asked me to do a payment plan for the washer and dryer. I told him that wasn't going to happen, and that if he wanted to keep any of the stuff mentioned, then he'd have to pay me cash before the move-out. He got more and more angry with me about taking my stuff. So, on the day of the move-out, I was scared and stressed. My dad's stepbrother and 2 of my friends came to help me. They were my emotional rocks and the muscle. As we were moving stuff out, my ex came home and handed my dad some money. He told my ex that it was my desk and to hand it to me. My ex gave me the money for the desk, so I left that for him. I took all the other furniture, which included the washer and dryer. Last I heard is that he got transferred to a store he hates working at, and our old boss now hates him. I did warn him I would tell people what he did. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 271. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use and sent in stories for use in this video. If you'd like to help out the channel and get the videos a little bit early, you can support me on Patreon, which is linked in the description. You'll also find links to the Hellfreezer merchandise store, and if you just want to do a one-off donation, you can do that during any video or stream. It is not required, but it is very much appreciated. Alrighty, let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is: what is something you very much appreciate, but you would never want to own? For example, I think marble statues, the really huge life-size ones, are wonderful, beautiful works of art. However, for practical reasons, I just wouldn't know where to put it. It'd look weird in the back garden, couldn't put it in the front garden, and I'd be forever tripping over it in the house. Let me know what some of your ideas are in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.